At 17:19 UTC on 7 March 2014, a captain said good night to air traffic control. 10 years later, Earth still hasn't said goodbye back. I'm sitting here in the dark, headphones clamped tight, listening to that same second hand crawl forward one single tick. It feels like the room itself just inhaled. You and I are about to live the next 90 minutes in real time, minute by exact minute, and every one of them will split the timeline clean in two. March 2014 on the left lane, and every matching minute of the decade ahead, peeling off on the right. No commercials, no cuts, no mercy. Just the sound of our breathing and the knowledge that somewhere out over the Indian Ocean, metal is still gliding. This is the still breathing pause. The moment before every story remembers it's a tragedy. The clock flips to 1720, and I swear I hear the captain's voice again, not on any recording, but as if the room itself exhales it. He says, "Good night, Malaysian 370, as casual as ordering coffee. I repeat those words aloud, tasting the weight of them, and the syllables feel heavier than lead, because we know now what he didn't, that 6 minutes later the transponder will go quiet, and 41 minutes after that, the satellite data unit will ping for the last time. But right now, at 1720, the plane is still breathing, too. I close my eyes and pilot it myself, imagining the gentle nose-up trim, the autopilot purring like a satisfied cat. Out over the Gulf of Thailand, the water is velvet black. No ships, no witnesses, just us. Somewhere in Kuala Lumpur, a mother is texting her son to remember he's allergic to shrimp. Somewhere else, a woman in Beijing sets an alarm for 5:30, never imagining she'll wake to silence. 17:02. The cockpit door opens and the first officer steps back in with 2 cups of weak tea. He places one beside the captain and jokes about turbulence being nothing more than potholes in the sky. They both chuckle, but it's the polite kind, the kind you give when you've told the same joke 100 times. I lean closer to my own mic and whisper, "Don't drink it yet," as if I could reach through the years and stall the timeline. 1722. An elderly man toggles his overhead light, trying to finish a crossword that will never be completed. A baby 2 rows up gives a single hiccup, the smallest sound, yet it makes me flinch, because I know the next hiccup will come from the engines as fuel is starved, 48 minutes from now. 1723. A passenger locks the door, washes her face, looks into the mirror and practices saying, "I'm fine," when she lands. She doesn't know the mirror remembers everything and keeps the secret. I feel the plane lean a fraction left, correcting for wind, the way a sleeper shifts pillows. 1724. A flight attendant texts her husband, "Maybe we'll try for another baby next year." She hits send without hesitating, the message racing downward through satellites and cables, faster than any plane. 1725. The seatbelt sign dings off, and 100 tiny freedoms unclick around me. I imagine the metal bird sighing in relief, as if it too wants to stretch its wings. 1726. The captain's hand hovers over the radio panel, then withdraws, the moment passing like breath on glass. He doesn't know that in 10 years, a search team will drag a piece of flaperon onto a beach, and the world will gasp in recognition. I'm breathing in sync with the engines now. 231 hearts beating as one. 1727. Kuala Lumpur Center calls again, just routine, asking for confirmation of next waypoint. The captain answers in the same calm baritone. No tremor, no hesitation. I close my eyes and wish I could tattoo that moment onto the sky so it can't be erased. 1728. Somewhere down below, a fishing boat rocks gently, its captain staring up, thinking he sees a falling star. But it's not falling yet. It's just gliding, 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 toward the longest goodnight in modern history. 1729. The air feels thinner already, anticipation thinning with altitude. I want to reach out and grab the minute hand, force it backward, but time is cruel and only moves forward. And I'm still sitting here, 10 years later, headphones clamped tight, waiting for the silence to begin. 1730. The captain clears his throat. Clears throat. About to say something else to air traffic control, but thinks better of it. Hold that thought, I murmur, because in the next minute, the first anomaly will spark like static. And once it sparks, there is no one knowing. only the long glide into the unknown. So we sit here together, minute by minute, breath by breath, waiting for the night to finish what it started. The pulse that replaced the second hand on the vanished clock is still beating. When the first minute after the hour passes, it is not a tick, not a click, just a soft white throb like the heart of some enormous creature we have never met and never will. I feel it in my own chest, an echo from the cockpit seats, as if the entire airplane is beginning to listen to something deeper than human hearing. I clear my throat and lean closer to the invisible microphone, because this is where the story splits like a seam. Out there, somewhere below 35,000 feet, Flight 370 is climbing. In here, in a fluorescent room in Kuala Lumpur, it is March of 2015, and investigators are opening their first sealed envelope of primary radar printouts. 2 moments, one in the sky, one on the ground, stitched together by the same heartbeat. Time is a funny tailor. The climb is gentle, almost polite. The engines hum a steady baritone. The wings rock once, twice, like a horse testing the bit. Up we go. The airframe seems to sigh. Inside the operations room, the printers hiss and spit out ghost gray lines. A young analyst named Liana squints, tilts her head, then tilts it further, as if the paper might rearrange itself if she just looks at it sideways. The civilian radar trace ends abruptly at 1 minute past the hour. No farewell, no signature. Just a calm, white gap. It's like the sky swallowed it, she whispers, and the room, which has been breathing coffee and old carpet all night, falls into a colder silence. Back in the sky, the transponder no longer speaks. Its 4-digit code, 2157, has turned to static, and the secondary radar dish down in Sepang spins fruitlessly, sending questions no one will answer. The co-pilot flexes his fingers on the yoke, uncertain whether to call out the loss or wait for the captain to notice first. Somewhere behind them, the airline's dispatcher is still tapping refresh on a screen that will stay stubbornly green. Minute 2 arrives on the wings like dew. The aircraft passes through 36,000 feet, nose up 1.5 degrees. Autopilot content, fuel flow steady. In the cabin, a passenger drops a paperback. The thud barely reaches the cockpit. Meanwhile, on the ground, Liana overlays the military radar tape, taken from a base that swore it had seen nothing. They saw plenty, it turns out. They just did not know what to call it. A faint smudge travels northwest, a ghost brushing the screen. She marks the timestamp, 0102. The military controllers, reviewing that same minute half a year later, feel the sweat return to their palms, even in air conditioning. We thought it was a friendly, one says, voice cracking. No scramble, no phone call, just the long breath of night and the unspoken agreement not to embarrass anyone. Their silence becomes another passenger on the flight, seated somewhere between hope and dread. Up above, the stars look closer now, colder, as if the sky itself is leaning in to listen. The aircraft banks 5 degrees left, barely enough to tilt a coffee cup, yet on the printout, that gentle arc looks like a question mark. Why are we turning? The paper asks. Nobody answers. Not yet. Minute 3 begins with a yawn from the captain, a yawn that catches halfway when he notices the ACAR's icon gone dark. He taps the screen once, twice, then lets his hand drop. The checklist says, if no response, proceed to SATCOM. He does not proceed. The checklist stays open like a novel with a missing page. Somewhere beneath the fuselage, the Indian Ocean stretches black and endless, practicing patience. On the ground, Liana pins 2 strips side by side, civilian blank, military smudged, and draws a single hesitant line between them. The pencil trembles, the line wavers. Somewhere in that waver lives the first theory, the first accusation, the first heartbreak. She circles the altitude change, then circles it again, darker, as if darker ink might make it more believable. The heartbeat we began with quickens, though no watch confirms it. It is the collective pulse of everyone who will ever hear this story. Passengers' families, investigators, you listening now. The aircraft climbs, the room analyzes, and the gap between them widens like a canyon carved by silence. We are only 3 minutes in, and already certainty has filed for divorce. And here's the hook that snags every mind. At exactly 0103, both stories pause. The cockpit voice recorder's 2-hour loop has begun overwriting its first 30 minutes, and nobody on Earth knows it yet. In 60 seconds, the last whispers of normal conversation will be erased forever. If we want them back, we better hurry. The pulse brightens, the night leans closer, and somewhere between the climb and the printouts, the unknown locks the door behind us. The pulse brightens, the night leans closer, and somewhere between the climb and the printouts, the unknown locks the door behind us. 1 minute past 1, 19, at that exact moment in Malaysia, sits frozen like a last breath caught in amber. I can almost hear the captain's voice again, relaxed, almost sleepy. Good night, Malaysian 370. Those 3 words, 12 letters, tumble out across the black ocean, and then, nothing. But that isn't where the story ends. It's where the echo starts. Fast forward 13 months, March of 2016, deep inside a windowless lab outside Paris, run by the Bureau d'Enquête et d'Analyses. Technicians in pale blue lab coats huddle over a steel table, their faces lit by the cold fluorescence of spectral analysis software. They have pulled the final transmission from a hard drive salvaged from a military satellite over the Indian Ocean, and now, frame by frame, syllable by syllable, they peel back silence itself. They are listening to a ghost that doesn't yet know it's dead. I watch them, well, I imagine I do, leaning over their shoulders like an invisible tourist of tragedy. The waveform on the monitor looks gentle, almost polite, a soft undulation of amplitude. Then the technician hits the loop button for the 5th time, and the word night stretches like taffy until it becomes a mournful chord. Somewhere inside that elongated phoneme hides turbulence, perhaps the subtle pop of a circuit breaker, or the fainter hiss of cabin pressure faltering. The lead examiner, a woman named Dr. Aviation, removes her glasses and massages the bridge of her nose. Every consonant is a breadcrumb, she mutters. But this one is odd. She isolates the final fricative, zooms in until the screen shows only a single second of audio stretched across 30 centimeters of pixels. The hiss looks jagged, as though tiny teeth are gnawing at the edges of the waveform. I feel my own pulse quicken. It's like watching a crime scene photo develop in slow motion. Meanwhile, back in March 2014, the cockpit voice recorder inside the doomed aircraft has already begun devouring itself. 30 minutes of ordinary conversation, checklists, idle jokes about Kuala Lumpur traffic, maybe a mention of someone's daughter's piano recital. Those memories are being overwritten by the soft mechanical breathing of an empty cockpit. The black box giveth, and the black box taketh away. Blessed be its spinning spool. Out in the Malaysian control room, nobody notices the handoff has failed. Lumpur radar expects the next sector, Ho Chi Minh, to chirp in with a crisp radar contact, but the frequency stays stubbornly empty. A controller named Fikri taps his headset, frowns, asks his colleague, "Did we miss the call?" The colleague shrugs. Maybe the crew simply forgot. That shrug will echo for years, a tiny gesture that snowballs into one of aviation's greatest mysteries. Dr. Aviation isolates the captain's final exhale. She filters out the radio hiss, the background engine harmonics, the cosmic radiation that sneaks into every satellite feed. All that remains is the pure shape of breath, a microscopic rise and fall, no louder than a candle flickering in a sealed room. She overlays it against a database of stressed breathing patterns, simulations from hypoxia training, high-G centrifuge tests, emergency decompression drills. The match is unsettling. Too calm for panic, too sharp for sleep. I picture the cockpit at that moment, lights dim to a soothing indigo, the autopilot humming its lullaby, the horizon an unbroken line of ink. Somewhere behind the cockpit door, 239 souls settle into the half-dream of overnight travel. Seatbelt signs click off. Babies stop crying. Even the galley lights seem to yawn. Dr. Aviation's intern, a lanky kid named Jules, leans closer. "What if the microphone cut out mid-syllable?" he asks. She shakes her head. Listen to the tail. She loops the last 50 milliseconds. There it is, a faint click, almost swallowed by static, like a fingernail tapping glass. Could be a breaker tripping. Could be the start of a catastrophic electrical failure. Could be nothing. In this business, nothing is often the loudest clue of all. Back in the sky, the transponder stops chirping its friendly identification code. Secondary radar paints only a ghost, a primary target without a name. Somewhere near the Igari waypoint, the aircraft slips sideways through a crack nobody knew existed. Controllers scramble, but the only evidence is an absence. I find myself wondering about the passengers. Did they feel the subtle tilt as the autopilot accepted a silent new heading? Did someone glance out the window and notice the stars sliding into unfamiliar constellations? Or did they simply drift deeper into sleep, trusting the hum beneath their feet? The data gives us no faces, only vectors. Dr. Shaw. Aveline saves her file, labels it MH370 Final Breath, Analysis version 42. She hesitates, then adds a single tag in the metadata. Handoff _2_nowhere. The cursor blinks, waiting for more certainty that will never come. She closes the lid of her laptop, and the screen's glow dies, like a match pinched between wet fingers. The clock in that lab reads 0427, but time feels optional here. Every second is both frozen and racing. And still, somewhere in the stratosphere, the aircraft keeps flying, or falling, or floating. Choose your verb. The evidence refuses to choose for you. I linger on that final syllable, replaying it like a broken lullaby. Night. A word meant to close the day, now welded to an open-ended horror. The technicians pack up, the lights dim, the corridor hums with fluorescent static. Yet in the dark, the waveform keeps singing its silent solo. And here's the part that wakes me at 3 a.m. The handoff was supposed to be routine, a gentle baton pass from one controller to the next, a phrase as old as aviation itself. Instead, it became a doorway nobody walked through, a salutation that never got its reply. The ghost of that good night floats somewhere between frequencies, waiting for the next clearance, the next vector, the next voice that will never come. So now, as the lab doors lock and Paris holds its breath under a pearl gray dawn, I'm left with a single question echoing louder than any cockpit alarm. If the final words have been found, and the final breath measured down to the molecule, why does the silence feel even larger than before? Stick around, because in the next 2 minutes, the Indian Ocean itself will start to speak, and what it says might drown every theory we have. So he left the cockpit frozen in silence, a question hanging heavier than any altimeter reading. But remember, the Indian Ocean promised to speak, and its first syllable arrives at exactly 700. Military radar across the Malay Peninsula chooses this moment to wake up, screens flickering like reluctant storytellers. Now, up to this point, the world thought the jet had simply vanished eastward, swallowed by the South China night. Instead, every sweep of a rotating antenna paints a new dot west of where it should be, as though the aircraft had changed its mind mid-sentence. I picture the operator rubbing tired eyes, leaning closer to the screen, then reaching for a second cup of coffee that suddenly tastes metallic. Because what he is seeing, or thinks he's seeing, is impossible. A scheduled commercial flight does not pivot 140 degrees, slicing back across the peninsula like a boomerang nobody threw. Yet the blip keeps moving, steady, deliberate, carving a vector that feels almost smug. At 7:23, the dot crosses the east coastline it left only minutes earlier, now ghosting above the sleepy fishing villages of northern Malaysia. Somewhere below, a lighthouse sweeps its beam across empty water, unaware the same sky is being watched by two kinds of eyes, one human, one silicon. And between them lies a gap of disbelief no algorithm can fill. I keep rewinding the leaked Thai radar image that surfaced in 2017, a grainy page of forgotten printouts. On that page, time compresses into a smear of arcs and timestamps, each arc a confession the military never meant to give. The paper itself is creased, as if someone clenched it in anger before slipping it into a folder marked routine. What strikes me is the calmness of the line. No panic, no stutter, just a smooth curve west until the screen ran out of coastline to measure. At 7:41, the blip vanishes from primary radar, swallowed by the same Andaman Sea that once cradled spice traders, and centuries later, pirates. The silence that follows is not empty, it's thick with implication. Because if the turn was intentional, then everything we assumed about fuel, about motive, about human reflex begins to slide sideways like a compass needle near iron ore. I pace my own kitchen floor at night, phone pressed to ear, listening to a Malaysian controller relive that morning. He tells me the voice he expected never came, yet the radar kept drawing. Like the plane was sketching its own escape route, he says, voice cracking. I hear the clatter of dishes in his background, ordinary life refusing to stay out of the frame. 8:02, a new radar site, this one Thai, but still half asleep, picks up a fragmentary return. No altitude, no squawk, just a whisper of metal. They almost missed it. I imagine the operator shrugging, filing a note for the morning briefing. Nobody will attend, because by then the world will be shouting about the South China Sea. 8:12, another blip, fainter now, drifting northwest as though sniffing for a corridor between monsoon clouds. The distance between each pulse grows, not because the aircraft is speeding up, but because the Earth itself is rotating away beneath it. Time and space begin to perform that Mobius trick I mentioned. The minute hand folds into the calendar hand until past and future look like the same thin strip of paper. I stop the recording, lean in closer. If you listen at just the right frequency, you can hear the Andaman tide counting seconds with the patience of a funeral drummer. 8:29. The last military trace dissolves into static, leaving behind only the knowledge that something huge slipped through a crack we didn't know existed. It's absurd, isn't it? Billions spent on eyes in the sky, yet a Boeing can wave goodbye like a polite stranger and never be asked for its name again. But the calendar keeps flipping, and here we are, years later, still chasing ghosts in the shape of arcs and timestamps. I print the Thai image again, tape it above my desk, next to my daughter's crayon drawing of a plane with oversized wings. Every morning, the ink looks a little more tired, yet the line stays stubbornly graceful, like calligraphy no translator can read. 8:45. I start to hear rumors, pilots, meteorologists, even a satellite engineer, who swears the arcs are actually singing. He claims if you convert the bearings to hertz, you get a lullaby the Indian Ocean once used to lure spiced dhows onto reefs. I tell him that's poetic nonsense, but I still download the audio file he sends at 2 in the morning. It sounds like wind chimes made of aluminum and regret. 8:59. The clock clicks toward 9:00, and I realize the turn wasn't just westward, it was backward through every assumption we ever filed under normal. The Mobius strip tightens, and suddenly past and future are the same breathless moment. Stay with me, because in the next chapter, the satellite pings begin, tiny handshakes from a phone line no one knew was open. And when those pings are translated, they spell a word no rescue crew ever wants to read: alone. 900 becomes 901, and I swear I can hear the engines breathe, like something ancient waking from a long sleep. We're still above the South China Sea, yet somehow already nowhere. Civilian radar has lost us. The transponder went dark at Igari, that invisible border in the sky where Malaysia hands you off to Vietnam, and Vietnam simply forgets. And below us, 2018 is folding over itself like wet paper, because while we ghost northwest at 39,000 feet, the Ocean Infinity search ship, Seabed Constructor, is steaming through the exact coordinates we're about to cross. I lean forward into the impossible overlap. Imagine sitting in a cold sonar control room 4 years after you vanished, watching the snow hiss across a monitor that still thinks you're down there. The sled they call Hugin is already sliding into -2-degree water, propellers turning like slow silver prayers. It's hunting a shadow that, right now, is still breathing recycled air above it. 10:06. The cockpit voice recorder has fallen permanently silent, but the satellite data unit keeps whispering once an hour, a handshake too quick for human ears. Oh, are you still there? The reply is always the same. Yes, but alone. I feel the plane tilt half a degree left, imperceptible to anyone who still had daylight. At 10:14, we cross the airway labeled M765. Controllers in Ho Chi Minh City stare at empty scopes, sipping coffee that tastes like static. Somewhere on their frequencies, another pilot asks if MH370 is still en route. Silence answers, polite and deadly. 10:21. Below decks of seabed constructor, the analysts cluster around a fresh sonar swath. The seabed looks like crumpled velvet, but every ridge could be a wing. They mark anomalies in neon rectangles, false hopes in rectangles of yellow. One technician mutters, "Could be a shipping container," and everyone nods, because hope has a weight limit. Back up here, the fuel continues to burn at 5 tons an hour. I picture the planet's curve ahead, an unlit runway stretching all the way to Antarctica. And nobody knows we've turned again, a gentle banking south so gradual it feels like the plane is dreaming. 10:33. The cabin is still pressurized. Masks haven't dropped. Passengers who chose the window seats see only their own reflections floating in the glass like worried ghosts. A child somewhere drops a plastic cup. Peng. And the sound ricochets down the aisle forever. Down below, Huygens' cameras click every 3 seconds, flashbulbs in the abyss. It glides 30 meters above the silt, searching for corners, rivets, anything man-made. The sound it makes is mechanical whale song, and when it passes directly beneath our current flight path, I swear we should feel it. But physics doesn't do callbacks. 10:41. I check my own imaginary watch and realize the timeline is slipping sideways. 43 minutes of invisible flight feels like 43 hours of insomnia. The next scheduled AC chart A is still 19 minutes away, but nobody on the ground is waiting for it yet. They think the aircraft is simply late. Late, like a friend who will never arrive. At 10:48, the autopilot, if that's still who is flying, makes another correction, nosing us toward the Strait of Malacca. The moon sits on our right wing like a pale spectator. I count heartbeats in the dark. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. Each one a reminder that time hasn't actually stopped. It's just pretending. 10:55. Aboard the search ship, they call it a night, stowing Huygens in its cradle like a sleeping child. Coffee cups clink in the galley. Someone laughs at a joke I can't hear, and the sound travels across 4 years of salt water straight into my ears. 11:01. Civilian radar coverage officially ends. Military eyes might still track us, but they're not talking. The sky feels suddenly bigger, like someone removed the ceiling. 11:07. The cabin lights dim to conserve power. The plane is thinking ahead, even if no one else is. I lean closer to the window and feel condensation cold as regret. We are 43 minutes into nowhere, and the next breath will take us past the edge of every map. 11:12. My imaginary timer ticks to the last grain. Somewhere in the coming hour, the satellite will chirp again, just once, and the world will misread that polite cough as a location instead of a farewell. But that's tomorrow's problem. For now, we remain suspended between heartbeat and heartbeat, between water too cold for life and air too thin for truth. 11:14. The minute hand twitches, and I realize I've been holding my breath. The next chapter begins with a ping that will shrink an ocean to the size of a coffin. Stay close, because when that handshake arrives, we'll finally learn the exact cost of being unseen, and the price just might be silence forever. 11:15. A single green pulse slides across the Indian Ocean like an EKG spike, and I can almost feel the sky flinch. Somewhere 38,000 feet above, 9MMRO sends its first automated handshake to an aging satellite parked over the equator. Inmarsat, 3F1, has been relaying cargo manifests and passenger emails all day, but now, at 15 minutes past the hour, it becomes the last stethoscope pressed to a metal chest that refuses to stop beating. Clears throat. The courtroom in Westminster is so quiet I can hear the barrister's watch tick, and every tick is a reminder that this satellite ping is already 93 milliseconds old, time enough for 260 kilometers of ocean to slide by unnoticed. Counsel for the families leans forward, sleeves rolled, voice soft as fog. "We will play the handshake exactly as the machine heard it," he whispers, and the clerk taps a key. A low synthetic tone rises, the kind of sterile beep you'd expect from hospital equipment. Except this beep travels at the speed of light, crosses the curvature of the planet, and still sounds lonely. The screen shows a flat line until, at 15 minutes past, A single spike appears. I feel my own pulse skip when I realize that spike is 43 minutes after the transponder went dark. 43 minutes of invisible flight, now boiled down to a single green mountain on an otherwise empty graph. The barrister doesn't speak. He just lets the beep hang in the air like incense nobody wants to breathe. We wait. 1001, 1002. Another minute passes without ceremony. The ocean below the aircraft has no idea it is being measured. I imagine the cockpit, if anyone is left inside, lit only by the glow of standby instruments and the faint red of emergency strips. Somewhere in the galley, a coffee pot has long since gone cold, its handle still upright like a question mark. The satellite, indifferent to human drama, simply logs the handshake and resets its timer for the next one. 44 minutes passed, nothing. 45, still nothing. The flat line stretches until I swear I can hear the graphite of the stylus scraping across paper that will never be read. Then, 16 minutes passed, a second ping, slightly weaker, slightly longer. A ripple goes through the gallery. This is not supposed to happen. The aircraft should either be climbing back into radar coverage or plunging toward the sea, but instead, it's coasting along a great circle route that no flight plan ever filed. The analyst beside me mutters a single word, half prayer, half curse. Handoff. The satellite doesn't know east from west. It only knows distance. And distance says the plane is farther from the satellite than it was 4 minutes ago. That means it's moving, but in which direction? Nobody answers. We just watch the green dot bloom and fade like a firefly that refuses to tell us its secret. 17 minutes passed. The third handshake arrives exactly on schedule, every 60 seconds, plus or minus 6 milliseconds. This time, the courtroom is ready. Families grip the railings like lifelines. The tone is higher now, almost plaintive, the digital equivalent of a child calling out in the dark. I find myself counting heartbeats between beeps, trying to match them to the imagined breathing of 239 souls. But the machine isn't breathing. It's just doing what it was programmed to do. Handshake, log, forget. When the spike fades, the silence is so complete I can hear the ventilation system sigh through the ceiling vents. Somewhere over the horizon, the aircraft keeps flying, and the satellite keeps listening, and the gulf between them widens 1 light millisecond at a time. 18 minutes passed. The fourth handshake is fainter still, the amplitude dropping like a candle guttering in wind. I picture the aircraft banking gently, perhaps to conserve fuel, perhaps because whoever is at the controls is no longer sure which way is up. The analyst types quietly, converting milliseconds to kilometers, kilometers to probable arcs across the sea. Each equation is a breadcrumb, but the birds are already circling. Counsel asks the technician to overlay Malaysian radar coverage onto the map, and the resulting shape looks like a bite taken out of the sky. We are literally filling gaps with ghosts. 19 minutes passed. The fifth handshake arrives late, 62 milliseconds after the scheduled interval. The hush in the room turns brittle. A delay can mean turbulence, course change, or simply a shudder in the satellite's atomic clock. But we are beyond nuance. We want drama. The technician zooms in on the waveform, and for the first time we see a double peak, as though the signal echoed off itself. Someone whispers, multipath, which is engineer speak for a reflection off water or fuselage, but it sounds like a diagnosis. I imagine the aircraft skimming low enough for the Indian Ocean to slap its belly, then climbing again, confused, alone. 20 minutes passed. Silence. The expected sixth handshake never comes. The flat line stretches longer than any before, and the courtroom holds its breath so completely I can hear the fluorescent lights buzz. Counsel looks at the clock, then at the empty graph, then at the families. No one moves. Somewhere, perhaps, fuel exhaustion has begun its quiet argument with gravity. I feel the ocean rising up through the floor, cold and patient. This is where stories usually end, but this story is still falling, still silent, still refusing to land. 21 minutes passed, nothing. The technician restarts the audio loop, replaying the first 5 beeps, and each replay sounds more like a question than a statement. I catch myself leaning forward, waiting for a sixth tone that will never arrive. The gap between 19 minutes and 22 becomes a canyon. The barrister finally speaks, voice cracked by fluorescent hum. "Ladies and gentlemen, the aircraft's final ping is behind us." He doesn't need to add that the silence ahead is bigger than any ocean we know how to cross. But the story refuses to end just because the signal does. I glance at the clock, 22 minutes past, and realize the next chapter begins not with a ping, but with a question. What happens to a heartbeat once no machine is left to measure it? We still have 68 minutes of silence to cross, and the ocean, patient as ever, is already folding those minutes into a depth no graph can reach. I lean closer to the microphone, as though speaking to the aircraft itself. Keep breathing, keep beating, even if no satellite is left to listen. Because at 23 minutes past, something else will speak. Something colder, darker, and far more permanent. And when it does, we'll finally find the silence that never ends. 20 minutes past the last handshake, and the fuel is still bleeding, gram by gram, across the dark Indian Ocean sky. No engines groan, no lights blink, just the steady arithmetic of burn rate and drag, numbers that think they know the plane better than the pilots ever did. I picture the aircraft as a silver ghost now, ribs showing through moonlight, every rivet counting down its own tiny countdown. The satellite pings have stopped, but other voices awaken, the cold equations of flow meters, the whisper of thermodynamic tables. And somewhere in a lockdown apartment in Melbourne, a postgraduate with sour coffee breath is about to turn those whispers into 4.2 billion screams. She boots her workstation at exactly 20 past 8 local time, which is 20 past the hour our bird went dark. She names the project Silencio, because naming things makes them feel smaller, less likely to swallow you whole. Then she unleashes a Monte Carlo swarm, virtual aircraft, each one a dice roll of wind, weight, and moral luck. Every second of real fuel equals roughly 1,000 simulated crashes. The room glows white from the monitor storm, like daylight trapped inside a coffin. Each phantom plane takes off from the same invisible runway, the moment MH370's transponder blinked out. Some fly north, some south, some spiral like dropped sycamore seeds. A few even loop back toward Malaysia, as though homesick, but the fuel never lies. It subtracts, subtracts, subtracts. When the tanks hit zero, the model freezes, drops a breadcrumb of latitude and longitude, then vanishes. 4.2 billion times. She watches the map bloom like frost on glass, arcs spreading, narrowing, folding into one slender corridor of probability. I lean into my microphone and ask the empty channel, what does it feel like to die 1,000 times before breakfast? She never answers, because she's too busy drinking cold espresso and praying the graphics card doesn't melt. By 21 minutes, the cloud of possible endings has tightened to a sickle-shaped band. Statisticians call it the seventh arc, but she calls it the scream line. Every data point on that curve represents an aircraft that ran out of sky at exactly the same distance from the satellite, yet landed in entirely different graves. Some on waves, some on ice shelves, one improbably on a desert beach where crabs would scatter its aluminum bones. She overlays ocean current models, drift charts, barnacle growth rates. The computer fans howl like wounded animals. The apartment smells of ozone and instant noodles. Outside, lockdown sirens wail, but she can't tell if they're for curfew or for her sanity. Each new simulation is a confession extracted at digital gunpoint. I switch the feed to a different lab, this one in Toulouse, where engineers feed the same fuel curves into a wind tunnel made of pure math. Their supercomputer is named Icarus, because irony is cheaper than originality. They push virtual airframes past Mach limits, flutter boundaries, pilot unconsciousness thresholds. Every failure writes a tiny epitaph in the log. Wing separation at second 3,412. Flameout at second 3,413. The list grows longer than any obituary page. They color code the deaths. Blue for controlled ditching, red for high-speed impact, black for mid-air breakup. It looks like a Christmas tree, if Christmas were celebrated by engineers who've forgotten how to cry. Back in Melbourne, her electricity bill arrives in an email flagged urgent. She laughs so hard she hiccups. The power company thinks she's running a crypto farm. Technically, they're right. She's mining grief. At 22 minutes, she isolates the phantom arc that hurts the most, a straight, lonely line southward, engines flaming out, one by one, like candles in a hurricane. The model shows a final glide ratio of 11:1, just enough for the cockpit voice recorder to keep breathing for another minute after the fuel is gone. 1 minute of black box silence, waiting for an ocean that never speaks. She reruns that trajectory at half speed, frame by frame, as if slowing the film will reveal a hidden scream. Instead, the numbers stay stubbornly polite. Altitude, airspeed, descent rate. An accountant's lullaby. She wonders if, somewhere inside that metal tube, a passenger counted these same seconds, perhaps tapping a nervous rhythm on the seatback tray. I catch myself counting 2. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3. The microphone hums like a distant turbine. 23 minutes. The laptop battery icon turns red. 3% left, same as the aircraft. She refuses to plug in, because stopping feels like betrayal. The final simulation spawns. Same weight, same weather, same cruel math. Fuel 0 at second 1,400. Impact velocity 230 knots. Debris field radius 22 nautical miles. She lets the screen dim, watches her own reflection appear like a co-pilot who never boarded. Somewhere in the cloud of phantom arcs, one point aligns perfectly with a remote patch of seafloor no human has ever seen. She tags it with a single word, maybe. But even that word feels too heavy for the map. I whisper to the listener, because we are all passengers now. The ocean hasn't finished writing yet. 24 minutes. The apartment lights flicker, the grid balancing lockdown demand. She saves the file, names it Silence Finished Isolated V7, then immediately renames it Silence Meta. There is no final, only deeper iterations. She shuts the lid. The room goes dark, except for the router's lonely green heartbeat. In that faint glow, the phantom arcs still hover behind her eyelids, like runway lights that forgot where the ground was. I sign off with the softest question I dare ask. If 4.2 billion ghosts can point to one patch of sea, what happens when we get there and find nothing but silence answering silence? Keep the channel open. The next 4 minutes promise something hungrier than math. The router's pulse is still blinking when I lean closer, as if that green dot might spell something out in Morse if I stare hard enough. 25 minutes have passed since we last spoke, and already the mathematics has grown teeth. I can almost hear them grinding somewhere beyond the office walls, chewing altitude into distance, distance into fuel, fuel into absence. Somewhere above the southern Indian Ocean, the Boeing's twin engines are sipping the last dregs of kerosene, each sip quieter than the last. Imagine 2 candles guttering in a cathedral the size of a continent. No, larger, because the nearest runway is 1,000 miles of storm away. When I model the burn rate, the spreadsheet cells turn from confident blue to a warning amber, and finally to the same blank white as the horizon they flew toward. Spreadsheets, it turns out, are cowards when the fuel gauge kisses 0. I open the 2021 drift report, and the room temperature drops 2 honest degrees. 86 fragments of barnacled flaperon, each one kissed by a unique colony of Lepus anatifera goose barnacles, form a breadcrumb trail science never thought it would need. A technician in Perth counted growth rings the way foresters count tree rings, except forests don't drift 700 miles in monsoon currents. Those rings whispered a birthday. The flaperon hit the water in late winter, somewhere south of 35 degrees, east of 93. The ocean, it seems, keeps stricter diaries than any black box. I close the report, and my ears ring with imagined surf. The investigators call it a splash point, but the phrase feels too gentle for what really happened. A 200-ton machine meeting water at speed doesn't splash. It detonates into confetti of insulation, seat cushions, and memories too small to name. The drift analysts drew their narrowing geas tighter and tighter until the circle was no wider than a city suburb, yet large enough to swallow every hope still floating. Back in the cockpit that never answered, the master caution chime has already sounded twice. The pilots would have felt a double chime, then a single, then nothing at all. I say pilots, but maybe by this point, only one heartbeat remained, or none. The autopilot, polite to the last, is still following the magnetic heading dialed in hours earlier, flying the ghost of a route no airway chart ever printed. I scroll to the fuel prediction curve, and the line dives like a hawk after prey. 4,000 pounds left, then 3. The altimeter unwinds through 29,000 feet, 28, 27, numbers that used to mean something. At 25,000, the engines flame out in sequence, 30 seconds apart, the way twins sometimes cry one after the other. That half-minute gap is the loneliest sound in aviation. The first engine windmilling to a stop, the second still screaming, then both surrendering to cold silence. With no generators spinning, the SATCOM tries to stay awake on battery, stretching its electronic fingers toward the Inmarsat satellite hovering 22,000 miles above the equator. One final logon request flickers upward, a digital SOS too faint to carry coordinates. The satellite notes the handshake in its ledger, timestamp 0643 universal, but refuses the next heartbeat. Connection terminated. After that, only the cockpit voice recorder keeps listening, taping an hour of absolute hush onto magnetic ribbon that will never reach dry land. I switch on the bathymetry's overlay, and the ocean floor rises into my screen like an inverted mountain range. The Diamantina Trench yawns deeper than Everest is tall, its walls scarred by ancient avalanches of silt. Somewhere along that escarpment, the fuselage now rests, pressed by 6 miles of water into a shadow too black for daylight to ever touch again. Even the titanium engines are learning humility down there, salt already etching serial numbers into illegible bruises. But the barnacles remember. One fragment still clutched a sliver of the Malaysian flag's red and white stripes beneath its calcium crust, a patriotism no current could wash away. I find myself whispering to no one in particular. How far can a national identity drift before it dissolves? Maybe farther than we are prepared to admit. My phone buzzes with a calendar reminder. 1 hour until the next data drop from the research vessel Fugro Equator. I picture her winches reeling in side-scan sonar towfish, like fishermen pulling up nets empty of everything except shapeless darkness. They've been dragging that patch of sea for so long, the ocean is starting to resent them. They found a 19th century anchor last week and joked it was MH370's parking brake. The humor leaks out thin and desperate. I drag the timeline bar to 29 minutes past the hour, and the simulation freezes on a single frame. The aircraft, in a gentle phagoid descent, nose up, wings level, as if choosing a soft place to lie down. No flames, no spiral, just surrender. The altimeter unwinds through 10,000, 5, 2, while the airspeed bleeds off to a stall that never recovers, because the ocean arrives first. I hold my breath with the phantom crew, counting down the last 1,000 feet in my head. When the simulation ends, the screen fades to black and reflects my own face back at me. Pale, eyes too wide, mouth slightly open as if still waiting for radio traffic that will never check in. The room smells of old coffee and colder questions. Somewhere inside the blackness of that screen, 239 stories just ran out of pages. And yet, the barnacles are still growing. New generations cling to fragments washed ashore on Reunion, Madagascar, Mozambique. Every grain of aluminum, a passport stamped by currents we barely understand. Each arrival is a knock on the door, but when I open it, only brine and silence stand on the mat. I stand up, joints popping like radio static, and pace the length of the office. The router's green light is still winking, counting seconds the way the engines once counted pounds of fuel. I press my thumb against it, as if I could dim the signal that stubbornly refuses to carry voices home. 4 minutes left in this chapter, and I realize the ocean has not loosened its grip at all. It has only tightened it, barnacle by barnacle, current by current, until the entire southern hemisphere feels like a clenched fist around one silent aircraft. I reach for the volume knob on the scanner, expecting nothing, and catch a fragment of distant shipping traffic, some container ship calling Port Louis, voice crisp with routine. For a moment, I imagine them steaming over the splash point, unaware that directly beneath their keel lies a tomb no flag can claim. How many ships have passed that spot since March 8th, 2014? Hundreds? Thousands? each wake erasing the last, yet somehow the coordinates remain etched deeper. The clock flips to 28:59, and I feel the minute hand lurch toward 29, as if it, too, fears what waits in the next chapter. I lean into the microphone one last time before the hour turns. Ready for this? Because the next segment starts with a ping that was never supposed to be heard, a signal traveling upward through 6 miles of black water, and it's addressed to no one alive. Keep the channel open. The silence is about to speak, and it has teeth. The silence has teeth, all right. And right now they are closing on the cabin row by row. 30 minutes after the last handshake with space, the lights begin to fail, not all at once, but like someone is walking the aisle and politely flicking switches. One overhead panel dims, then another, until the only glow left is the eerie blue wash of the no smoking sign that refuses to give up. I lean closer to the microphone, and I can almost feel the temperature drop. Because here is where memory starts bending like thin metal. In Kuala Lumpur, 2 years after the disappearance, a woman named Liana tells psychologists she woke at exactly 31 past the hour, drenched in sweat. She says she saw row 27, her brother's seat, go black, and she smelt jet fuel that wasn't there. The shrink nods, writes grief hallucination, but Liana just closes her fist so tight the pen mark on her palm looks like a contrail. Now, imagine you're in that cabin right this second. The PA crackles once, then nothing. Like the pilot wanted to speak but forgot the language. Somewhere aft, a child starts counting. 1, 2, 3. The oxygen masks drop in perfect choreography, but no one screams. Instead, the sound is a soft collective inhale, as though every passenger just remembered they were holding their breath since takeoff. Yeah, I know, it sounds impossible, but the cockpit voice recorder is still out there somewhere, and silence has a way of becoming evidence. Psychologists call this shared dream contamination, but I call it resonance. Dr. Annika Rao sits across from another next of kin, a father whose daughter wore a red hoodie that night. He tells her that in his dream, the hoodie glowed crimson even after the lights went out, a floating ember in the aisle. Anika shows him the manifest. Seat 22, indeed. She later admits to me she felt the temperature dip in her own office when he spoke, like a ghost adjusted the thermostat. 32 minutes. The flicker reaches the galley. A coffee maker gives one last gurgle and dies. The crew's emergency flashlights blink twice, then steady, carving cones of white that catch nothing but drifting dust. And here's the strangest part. The flight attendants don't move toward the passengers. They stand shoulder to shoulder, facing the rear, as if something back there is more important than the masks in front. I pause to sip water, and the glass trembles in my hand. Because I just realized I'm describing the scene the same way Liana did, word for word, and I never met her. Somewhere between satellite arcs and phantom pings, the story is telling itself through whoever listens long enough. The psychologists call it transference. I call it infection. 33 minutes. The aisle lights give up entirely. Now the only illumination is the emergency floor strips, thin green serpents guiding feet that aren't moving. A man in business class unbuckles despite the sign, stands, and reaches toward the mask he cannot see. His fingers brush plastic, then nothing, like the mask retreated from his touch. He laughs, a dry sound that dies between the seat backs, and sits again, unsure whether he ever stood. In the interview room, the father with the red hoodie memory asks Anika if dreams can be broadcasts. She tells him no, but her pen hovers above her notepad like it wants to write yes. Later, she finds the word row inked on her wrist, though she doesn't remember doing it. And her own handwriting looks foreign, almost mechanical. 34 minutes. The cockpit is a black box inside a black box now. No sunrise, no cities, no horizon. Just the soft red glow of standby instruments that feel apologetic for still being alive. The altimeter rolls backwards so slowly, the numbers seem embarrassed. A single alarm chimes, a gentle ding, the kind you hear when you forget to turn off the seatbelt sign. It echoes, unanswered, through the length of the plane. Outside, psychologists gather data, but inside, the boundary between witness and dream is dissolving like sugar in tea. Liana's mother claims she heard the ding too, at the exact same second, while folding laundry. The washing machine was mid-spin, yet she swears the sound came from the lint trap, as if the dryer had eaten a cockpit chime. And now we reach the 35th minute. The masks are still dangling, untouched, rocking like tiny parachutes testing the air. Somewhere in the tail, the auxiliary power unit coughs once. Then the last source of manufactured light gives up. Absolute dark. No moon, no stars. Just the sound of 239 people breathing in perfect synchrony, as though the cabin itself has become one set of lungs. And then, just before the next minute ticks over, that upward ping arrives, the one I promised you at the start. It is not from the black box recorder, because that sits silent at the bottom of the sea. This ping travels the other way, from the cabin to the cosmos, and it carries no coordinates, only a single, looping word spoken in a child's voice. Row! The channel is open, the silence bares its teeth again, and somewhere, a clock that shouldn't still be running skips a beat. The child's voice, just that tiny word, row, keeps looping in the dark, like a skipping phonograph made of starlight. I press my thumb against the headset as if I could hush it, but the syllable only stretches longer, tasting of aluminum and salt. Somewhere between the 35th and 36th minute, silence itself turns inside out, and I realize, clears throat, we have arrived at the fork in the story. One path shows Captain Zahari, hands steady on the yoke, guiding the Boeing like a wounded albatross, searching for one last calm stretch. The other path is pure vertigo, nose down, engines windmilling, a 40-degree bank that tightens into a corkscrew. Both futures share the same present. 6 minutes from now, the fuel will cough and die. Which one feels truer? Hold that question. I need your heartbeat for ballast. At 36 minutes past the final goodbye, new radar slices surface from a Malaysian military hard drive nobody remembered existed. The technician who found them swears the files were dated 2023, but stamped with 2014 metadata. Classic bureaucratic spookiness. The dots on those tapes move differently, slower, almost hesitant, before vanishing south. That hesitation is everything. It suggests wings still fighting, not surrendering. Now picture two alternate timelines unfurling side by side like a magician's double-ended silk. In timeline A, the glide, Zahari trims the aircraft to a gentle 3-degree descent. He kills the cabin lights to spare passengers the view of approaching waves. They never see the water. They see only the soft orange glow of his tablet as he scribbles a note no one will read. He writes, "Tell them I tried." Timeline B is uglier. The autopilot disengages with a mechanical gasp. The starboard engine flames out first, then the port. 1-2, like a sinister drumbeat. The nose drops through 20,000 feet, then 10, then 5. The spiral tightens until G-forces pin cell phones to the ceiling. By 3,000 feet, the ocean is a spinning black disk, hungry. The disk always wins. But which timeline owns the ping we just heard? That child's voice? Let's call her Passenger 7 Bravo. Did she speak from a gently gliding cabin or from the floor of a death dive? I replay the audio at half speed. The word row has a Doppler hush, like it's moving away from us. Glide theory says altitude stretches sound. Spiral says rotation distorts it. Both interpretations fit, so neither comforts. Minute 37. Fuel starvation becomes official. The cockpit chime is a single polite ding, the aviation equivalent of clearing one's throat. In timeline A, Zahari reaches for the APU switch out of habit, muscle memory from sim sessions nobody knew he ran on his home computer at 2 in the morning. In timeline B, the same switch is ignored. The spin has already robbed the crew of Horizon and Hope. I lean closer to the radar snippet, and the pixels breathe. There, between the 7th and 8th sweep, a micro jog to the left, then right again. A human correction, or just the jitter of a dying transponder? Analysts on aviation forums call it the phantom wiggle, a phrase so silly it's almost disrespectful. I find myself whispering along anyway. Meanwhile, the cabin in timeline A has gone monastic. No screaming, only the soft rustle of life jackets being removed from pouches like guilty secrets. A businessman clasps hands with the stranger beside him. Neither asks names. Somewhere, a phone vibrates against a seat rail, screen lighting up with a missed call icon shaped like a heart. Timeline B is a centrifugal symphony. Luggage avalanches from overhead. A duty-free bottle of scotch arcs past the ceiling, trailing amber constellations. Oxygen masks swing like pendulums nobody can reach because the G-forces press them flat against seatbacks. The sound is a low, continuous growl, the airframe arguing with physics and losing. Minute 38 arrives, holding its breath. Both timelines approach the same watery mirror, but from opposite moral directions. Glide theory says the ditching will be survivable for some, perhaps many. Spiral theory says the impact will register on seismographs 400 miles away. The child's voice loops again, softer now. Row. Row. As if she's already in that mythic boat, ferrying souls across whatever river claims them. I catch myself counting heartbeats instead of seconds. 39. 40. The fuel exhaustion alarm becomes a heartbeat itself. Lub-dub, lub-dub, until I realize it's mine. Classic investigative empathy. I've become the timeline I'm studying. And now, the final 2 minutes bloom open like a time-lapse flower. In timeline A, Zahari spots a rogue swell angled just right, flares the aircraft, and the belly kisses foam with a sound like tearing silk. In timeline B, the spiral becomes a spear. The ocean does not kiss. It punctures. Which ending do I mail to the families? Which one do I keep for myself? Clears throat. The radar snippet ends mid-sentence, as if the operator simply walked away from the screen. The child's voice, mercifully, fades at 42 minutes exactly, replaced by the purest silence I have ever sold for ad revenue. But the silence is not empty. It's pregnant with the question nobody wants to ask out loud. And that blip, well, it's not on the archived tape. It's live, right now, somewhere out beyond the search grids. Which timeline does it belong to? I can't tell you. Yet. The next chapter begins at minute 43, and the forked road might just braid itself back together. Stay with me. Minute 43 has arrived, and the second hand on my studio clock just twitched like it was nudged by a ghost. I promised you the forked road might braid itself back together, and right now, I feel the strands tugging at my sleeves like invisible children. Somewhere beyond the search grids, a pulse is about to speak for the last time, and half a world away, 239 paper lanterns are being lit against the equatorial night. Same second, same breath, just split across 10 years and 6,000 miles. I keep the archived handshake logs open on my left monitor, the cursor blinking like a sleepy lighthouse. At precisely 19 minutes and 37 seconds past the midnight hour, the seventh handshake, the one the engineers called the log-on request, but the families call the final heartbeat, flares across the screen. It lasts 8 microseconds, less than the time it takes a hummingbird to blink, yet it crams an entire ocean of grief inside that flicker. The burst carries satellite ID, aircraft ID, and a BFO value that still makes the mathematicians wake screaming. Not from horror, from sheer unsolvability. Meanwhile, on a beach in Kuala Lumpur, the memorial coordinator raises a silver whistle to her lips. She isn't timing the whistle to the ceremony. She's timing it to the cosmic metronome that governs satellites and sorrow alike. When the whistle shrills, the first lantern lifts off, a translucent paper sphere glowing amber from within. The families have practiced this for weeks, rehearsing the exact delay between lighting the wick and letting go so that the lantern crests the palm line at 00, 19 minutes and 37 seconds UTC. Not 36, not 38, 37. Because grief, apparently, is a precision instrument. Inside the plane, if we dare step back into that frozen moment, the cockpit is darker than any tomb. The only illumination comes from the standby compass, its dim red glow, painting the yolk like dried blood. The seventh handshake fires through the SATCOM unit mounted aft of the main cabin. A tiny ceramic antenna, no bigger than a lunchbox. It chirps once, then silence. No eighth request ever comes. The aircraft, wherever it is, has either nosed into the sea or slipped into a parallel slipstream we don't yet have numbers for. The data says minus 2.3 kilohertz offset. My gut says goodbye. Back on the beach, the whistle has become a heartbeat. 239 lanterns now form a glowing constellation ascending over the South China Sea. Each orb carries a name, inked in delicate Malay or Mandarin or English script, ink that will burn away long before the paper chars. A little girl lets go of her lantern too early. Her mother pulls her close and whispers, "Wait for the beat." The child counts under her breath, 16, 17, 18. Release. The lantern rises precisely on 19. Somewhere above them, an invisible satellite notes the moment and records nothing unusual. I overlay the handshake log with the ceremony timestamp, and the match is eerie. 001937.300 UTC. Both streams. One stream ends, the other begins. Clears throat. Scientists call this simultané a coincidence. Poets call it a hinge. I'm stuck between the two stools, scribbling equations on a yellow legal pad and writing elegies in the margins. The BFO value, minus 2.3, keeps looking back at me like a confession it never meant to give. Maybe the aircraft was already spiraling, engines flamed out, the SATCOM rebooting in a last reflex before salt water swallowed the circuits. Or maybe the plane is still gliding somewhere else, and we're just listening to its ghost frequency. In the memorial crowd, an elderly man stands apart. He wears the uniform of a retired Malaysia Airlines captain, wings dulled by years of disuse. He doesn't hold a lantern. He holds a handheld aviation radio, modified to scan the aeronautical distress band. At 001937 sharp, he presses the squelch and listens. Static. Always static. But tonight, the static feels heavier, like it's carrying extra ocean. Oh, he nods once, as though the nothing he hears is exactly the something he expected. Then he clips the radio back onto his belt and walks into the surf until the water reaches his knees, letting the tide wash over his shoes. I rewind the handshake spectrogram again and again, hunting for a microburst of cockpit voice, a cough, a prayer, anything. Nothing human survives 8 microseconds. Yet in the empty bandwidth, I swear I hear the faintest echo of the memorial whistle. A feedback loop across years. My rational brain says cross-contamination of audio channels. My storyteller brain says time just folded itself into a Mobius strip. I mute the recording and step onto my balcony. The city below is quiet, but the sky feels crowded with lanterns I cannot see. The ceremony coordinator announces the final count. 239 lanterns accounted for. She thanks the families, the media, the moon. And then she does something unexpected. She releases a 240th lantern. It is blank, nameless, and rises faster than the others, as if it carries no burden of identity. The crowd gasps, some weep. A journalist asks whom the extra lantern represents. The coordinator simply says, "The possibility." I return to my desk and notice something new in the handshake log. Hidden in the metadata, buried beneath layers of checksums and parity bits, sits a timestamp anomaly, 0019 minutes, 37.00 UTC, and half a second later, 0019 minutes, 37.500 UTC. Same handshake, split in two. The second pulse is weaker, distorted, as though it traveled a longer path. My pulse quickens. Could the blank lantern be more than metaphor? Could the SATCOM have bounced an echo off something? Another aircraft? A pocket of ionized air? A rift in the grid itself? I isolate the echo, amplify it beyond recommended thresholds. Inside the white noise, I catch a syllable, just one. It's clipped, genderless, but unmistakably human. Wait. The word lasts 3 milliseconds, then collapses back into static. My hands are shaking so hard, I nearly knock over the microphone. I play it again. Wait. The memorial lanterns are now distant orange pinpricks, but their reflection flickers across my monitors, like Morse code I'm only beginning to translate. The retired captain walks back up the beach, soaked to the thighs. He stops beneath a sodium street lamp and peers at something in his palm. It's the battery cover from his handheld radio, missing since 2014. He hasn't seen it in a decade. Tonight, it washed up at his feet, metal dulled but intact. the tiny serial number still legible. He turns it over and finds grains of sand fused into the circuitry, as though the ocean heated them into glass. He looks up at the sky, now empty of lanterns, and says nothing, but his eyes say everything. I bookmark the echo, save it to 3 separate drives, label it wait.wav. Then I pull up the satellite ephemeris for the exact moment of the 7th handshake. The bird that received the signal was positioned over the Indian Ocean, longitude 94 east, latitude just shy of the 7th arc. Its footprint should not have reached Kuala Lumpur, not by 3,000 miles, yet the echo aligns with the lantern release, as if the Earth itself bent the wave around its grief. Either physics has a poetic streak, or the planet is trying to finish a sentence we started 10 years ago. I close the session, but leave the monitors humming. Somewhere in the static there's a runway we haven't built yet. Somewhere in the lanterns there's a path the plane might still take. I can't tell you which timeline will blink first. But I'm leaving the mic hot tonight, just in case the echo decides to finish its thought. Stay tuned. The monitors hum like sleeping cats, and I keep my promise. The mic stays hot. I promised you I'd leave it on, just in case the echo decided to finish its sentence. Well, it just did. At exactly 49 minutes and 6 seconds past the hour, the engines gave up their last gulp of fuel. No fiery explosion, no Hollywood flare, just a sigh from the turbines that sounded almost apologetic. I leaned closer to the speakers, heart syncopating with the static, and then I heard it. A single metallic thud, dull, distant, yet unmistakably final. The ocean had finally spoken back. I should back up. Earlier this week, I was handed a thumb drive wrapped in electrician's tape. No label, just a scrawled 2024, eyes only. I was told to listen alone, in the dark, with the clock stopped. The file was a raw hydrophone recording from a classified submarine patrol south of the 90 East Ridge. Timestamp, unfiltered, 63 seconds long. The sub had been hunting whale song for calibration when something else blipped onto the spectrogram. The recording starts with the usual creaks, hull expanding, distant shrimp crackling like rain on a tin roof. Then, at the 49th minute, the background hiss drops by half, as if the ocean itself inhaled. That's when the thud arrives. It's not sharp like an explosion. It's heavy, rounded, like a freight train kissing a mattress underwater. A moment later, a cascade of smaller clinks. Rivets? Seat frames tinkle down through the water column before the abyss swallows them forever. I loop the clip 47 times, counting milliseconds between the clinks. They accelerate, then slow. Classic debris field settling. The submarine crew marked the bearing. 270 degrees, depth 4,950 meters, give or take the length of the Eiffel Tower laid sideways. They logged it as unknown seismic, filed it under routine, and sailed on. But the officer who slipped me the drive added a sticky note. Remind you of anything? I feel the decade collapsing into that single moment. All the satellite arcs, the drift models, the handshake pings, they compress into one blunt syllable, spoken by 700,000 pounds of aluminum meeting 5-degree water. The cabin lights we imagined flickering in Chapter 9, this is their last spark. And here's the cruel part. The ocean kept it secret for 10 years. No SOS buoy, no black box pinger. Those batteries died screaming into an empty house. The submarine's hydrophone was the only ear, and even then, it filed the scream under MISC. Imagine dying in a cathedral the size of Australia, and the only witness thinks you're tectonic indigestion. I pull up the original Inmarsat handshake that ended Chapter 11. Timestamp, 001937. The submarine contact, 001939. 2 minutes, exactly the glide time at best LD ratio minus fuel starvation. The numbers click together like tumblers in a lock. I didn't know I was picking. Someone knocks on my door just then. 3 measured taps. I mute the speakers, heart jackhammering. A voice, muffled. You playing that file? I don't answer. Footsteps retreat, but the hallway light stays on, slicing under the door like a warning flare. Whisper. They know I have it. I press play again. Past the thud, past the settling clatter, there's something else. faint, rhythmic, almost like breathing. I isolate the frequencies, boost the gain until the room itself seems to exhale. It's not mechanical, it's organic when, slower than human, but undeniably alive. Could be a whale passing the grave, could be the hull still groaning as pressure equalizes, or, and here my skin prickles, could be the echo finally answering. The clock hits 52 minutes. I realize I've been holding my breath for the last 60 seconds. I let it out, and it fogs the cold glass of the monitor. The thud loops again, but now it feels different. Personal, accusatory. 10 years ago, the world asked the sky and got silence. Tonight, the ocean replied, but it whispered into the wrong ear and filed the answer under MISC. I debate uploading the raw file, timestamp and all. Would it bring peace or just fresh storms? Before I decide, the power flickers, once, twice, then steadies. A message pops on screen, white text on black. Connection unstable, save your work. Even the machines know when a secret is too heavy for the wire. I save the file under a nonsense name, call it Track 9, and encrypt it 3 layers deep. Then I do something reckless. I set a timer for midnight and instruct the server to auto-upload unless I cancel. A dead man switch for the truth. The monitors hiss louder now, as if the ocean's inside the circuits, pressing its face against the glass. I lean in until my forehead nearly touches the screen. Somewhere in the static, I swear I hear seatbelt chimes. 1, 2, 3, like passengers still believing in arrival. I whisper back the only thing I can think of. I'm sorry it took this long. The countdown shows 58 minutes remaining. Outside, the hallway light finally clicks off, plunging everything into the same ink that swallowed 390. I leave the mic hot, the speakers low, and the window open to the night. If the echo has more to say, it has less than an hour before the world hears it too. But what if the upload finishes and nothing happens? What if the ocean's single syllable is all we're ever getting? I back away from the desk, hands shaking, feeling the thud travel up through the floorboards and settle in my chest like a second heartbeat. Midnight is coming. Choose whether to listen. The upload bar freezes at 97% and just sits there, pulsing like the heartbeat of something asleep in the cables. I can almost feel the phantom warmth of the server farm breathing against my cheek. Somewhere beyond the screen, 390 has 6 minutes left in its final glide. 6 minutes that, until tonight, were locked in saltwater silence. I promised myself I wouldn't refresh the page, but my finger betrays me again and again. Tap, 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 like I'm knocking on a coffin lid. Then the bar lurches forward. 98, 99. The window vanishes and a new folder simply appears. MH370_sim_2025_leak. No preview icon, no fanfare, just a name that feels heavier than lead. I double-click and the room drops 3 degrees. The first file is an audio reconstruction labeled Breathing Only. I hover, pulse hammering, then press play. What unspools is not words, just respiration. Steady, calm, mechanical. The way a practiced crew keeps their lungs under control when everything else is screaming. There's a faint metallic click, like a seatbelt settling into its socket, followed by the soft thud of a switch being nudged. Maybe the transponder master, maybe the fuel balance valve. The sound is microscopic, yet it feels as if the floor tilts with it. I catch myself bracing against the desk, my own breathing syncing with the ghost on the track. Don't fall in step with the dead, I mutter. Too late. At 54 minutes past the hour, the simulator coughs up another layer. Cockpit ambience enhanced. Now I can hear the tiny whine of gyros resetting, the lazy flick of a checklist page, the rubbery sigh of a yoke being gently centered. Nothing frantic, nothing heroic. Just ordinary motions in an extraordinary vacuum. It's terrifying how routine the end can look. I glance at the running timer. 55 minutes gone, 5 remaining in the flight's final arc. My phone buzzes with a single text. You hearing this too? No name. Probably another insomniac on the same torrent stream. I don't answer. The shared silence feels more honest than any reply I could craft. The reconstruction suddenly widens its stereo field. A distant, almost subaudible rumble joins the mix. Maybe the APU spinning down. Maybe the ocean beginning to fold itself over the fuselage. My mind races to picture it. The black mirror swelling up like a second sky. I swallow hard, tasting copper. 56 minutes. The breathing track fades for 3 heartbeats, then returns, slightly quicker, as though whoever owns those lungs suddenly remembers oxygen is optional. A switch snaps, sharp, decisive, and the sound of rushing air swells. I instinctively lean back from the speakers, chasing distance that isn't there. A new file auto-loads. Switch analysis. Spectrogram overlay. The screen blooms with neon ridges that look like mountain ranges stretched sideways. I can't read them, but I can feel them. Each peak is a choice. Descend, disengage, accept. I trace one ridge with my finger, and it vibrates like a guitar string under glass. Somewhere, an engineer is probably screaming that I'm anthropomorphizing data. But tonight, the data doesn't seem to mind. 57 minutes. The breathing steadies again. Inhale for 4 counts, exhale for 6, like someone counting down to a jump rope rhyme only they remember. Another click, softer, almost tender, and the cockpit ambience thins to a hush so complete I can hear my own blood. This is the moment before the moment, the hush before the crush. I tab over to the black box metadata and see a timestamp discrepancy. The CVR stopped recording 4 seconds after the FDR. 4 seconds of pure soundless memory no algorithm can rebuild. I imagine those 4 seconds stretching into years, looping in the circuitry of drowned black titanium. 58 minutes. The final reconstruction layer loads. Spatial breath map. It's nothing but colored fog drifting across a wireframe cockpit. Turquoise for the captain, amber for the first officer, violet for the jump seat observer whose manifest entry was later redacted. The fog pools near the ceiling, then curls downward like incense. I find myself inhaling along, tasting salt that isn't there. The timer rolls to 59 minutes exactly. The breathing stops, not abruptly, not dramatically, just runs out of road. The last sound is the tiniest scrape, almost certainly a headset being lifted away from one ear, as if someone wanted to hear the outside world one last time. Silence. Not the manufactured silence of paused audio, but the vacuum-sealed absence that swallows even the idea of echo. The progress bar reaches its end and quietly deletes itself, leaving only the folder name blinking like a lighthouse with no keeper. I sit there, palms sweating on the disk, waiting for an epilogue that refuses to load. Somewhere outside, a car alarm goes off and dies in the same breath. My monitor flickers once, like it's clearing its throat, then settles back into black. And I realize the leak never promised answers. It only offered company in the last 6 minutes of a fall that never quite ends. I reach to shut the laptop, then stop. There's still one file I haven't opened. Title hidden under a string of zeros, size too small to contain anything useful. Or maybe just small enough. I hover my finger over it. The cursor winks again, inviting, daring. Midnight has come and gone, but the night feels brand new. I finally click. The file opens with a soft click that feels louder than thunder. It's just a single line of text and a timer. 60 minutes, counting down. But the line says, every minute here is a year out there. And the clock starts now. 60 minutes, 10 years. My chest tightens. I lean back and watch the second hand sweep like a submarine propeller. First minute gone. 2014 fades into view. Ships drag sonar torpedoes through ink-black water. They call it the Free-Grow Equator. Heroic little boat. But tonight she's a ghost fishing for ghosts. Side-scan sonar paints the seafloor in grayscale. Every ridge a possible wing. Every shadow a maybe. Nothing. Next minute. Another year. 58 minutes left. Year 2015. The first debris washes up on Reunion Island. A flaperon, barnacled like a curse. Families see it on the news, and for one cruel heartbeat, think the rest of the plane will follow. Experts gather, measure, argue. Some say the currents prove the crash zone, others say the barnacles prove nothing. Theories bloom like algae, then rot. I feel the minute hand lunge. 56 minutes, 2016. Malaysia, Australia, China sign a new deal. More money, more robots. Malaysia, Australia, China sign a new deal. More money, more robots. The submersibles dive to 4,000 meters, where the pressure could crush a city bus like a soda can. They glide over the broken ridge, past extinct volcanoes older than dinosaurs. Their lights find shipwrecks, whale bones, shopping trolleys, everything but the Boeing. One robot gets lost, drifts for days, sends back selfies of the abyss before dying. 54 minutes, 2017. Private companies step in. Crowdfunding buys a slick new drone with GoPros for eyes. Internet sleuths draw grids on satellite pictures until their coffee goes cold. They spot shapes that look like fuselages, tail sections, even the word Malaysia written in seaweed. Each hopeful ping ricochets around forums, then dissolves into digital fog. 52 minutes, 2018. Ocean Infinity arrives with a fleet of 8 autonomous Hugins. They promise no cure, no pay. The seabed becomes a library scanned in 5-meter lanes. Sonar contacts stack up. Rock 76, debris field 9, anomaly 34. Each one a wrapped gift that turns out to be empty. I watch the counter tick and feel my pulse sync with its rhythm. 50 minutes, 2019. Hope is thinner now, stretched like cling film over grief. Whew. A memorial garden opens in Kuala Lumpur with 239 names carved in black granite. Families leave origami cranes that dissolve in the rain. Scientists publish papers suggesting a new drift model, a new search box farther north. Funding dries up. I feel the room grow colder. 48 minutes, 2020. The pandemic swallows the world. Search ships stay in port, crews quarantined. I scroll old footage of sonar lines and imagine the ocean stitching itself shut. Conspiracy theories go viral. Remote hijacking, secret runways, alien abduction. One influencer claims the plane is hidden in Kazakhstan. His video racks up 10 million views. 10 million people who'd rather believe in Bond villains than silence. 46 minutes, still 2020. I open a second window on the laptop. Raw audio from hydrophones in the Indian Ocean. They call them sound fixing and ranging stations, but tonight, their ears pressed to the planet's skin. Somewhere in the hiss, I swear I hear a distant metallic groan, maybe the hull giving way, maybe just my imagination. The counter drops to 45. My coffee goes cold. 43 minutes, 2021. New drift analysis points south again, but the water is deeper, colder. A single sonar contact named Contact 73 looks promising. They dispatch a drone, live stream the dive. 200,000 viewers watch mud, more mud, then nothing. The chat scrolls heart emojis anyway, like candles at a cyber wake. 40 minutes, 2022. Debris stops washing up. The ocean seems finished confessing. Families start to accept that closure comes in fragments, like sunlight through broken glass. I glance at the timer. 39 minutes left, meaning 9 more years, compressed into half an hour. The next file autoloads, labeled Possible Cockpit Voice Recorder Raw.wav. It's only 8 seconds long. 8 seconds. 8 years unspooling. I hover my finger over the spacebar. The lamp flickers, as if the room itself is afraid to listen. Somewhere beyond these walls, the real clock keeps ticking. The real ocean keeps rolling, and 239 souls keep waiting. My throat tightens. I haven't pressed play yet, and already I'm drowning. What's on that recording? A final gasp, a mechanical lullaby, or silence so pure it has teeth. I draw a breath that tastes like rust and midnight. The cursor blinks, 3, 2, 1, and I still haven't moved. The counter spins down to 38 minutes, 36. Somewhere inside this second, tomorrow is already a decade away. And I'm still here, finger frozen, heart loud enough to wake the drowned. And just like that, the counter hit 90 minutes flat. No drum roll, no white flash, just a soft click inside the headphones as the waveform flattens into a single, stubborn line. I swear the room temperature drops 3 degrees when the silence begins. It is not the absence of sound, it is presence wearing absence as a mask. I lean closer, as though nearness could coax a secret out of emptiness. A minute ago I was drowning in static. Now I'm floating in glass. My pulse sinks with the nothing until I can no longer tell which is the echo and which is the heart. The clock on the wall keeps ticking, but each tick feels like a question no one has answered in 10 long years. Somewhere in the background, the carrier wave keeps humming, so faint it might be tinnitus or hope. They told us the black box stops pinging after 30 days, yet here we are, listening to a ghost that refused to read the manual. I press the headphones tighter, afraid the sound will slip away if I so much as breathe. The thought comes unbidden. Maybe the silence is not broken, because it is not silence at all. Maybe it is a dialect of the deep ocean, a language stitched from pressure and salt. What if the plane never vanished? What if it simply learned to speak quietly? I feel the absurdity, but absurdity has been the only passenger on this ride since hour one. I glance at the transcript on the screen, the last dozen lines repeating like rosary beads. Good night, Malaysian 370. 7 syllables that became a lullaby for the bereaved. I mouth them, and the words taste of metal. 10 years of headlines, sonar grids, conspiracy courtboards, and still the sentence hangs unaltered. A monolith no crane can tilt. The carrier wave wavers, dips half a hertz, and my heart leaps like a fish that just heard a net. I scramble for the gain knob, but the line steadies again. False alarm, or maybe the ocean reminding me it still has lungs. I sit back, vertebrae popping like bubble wrap, and realize I have been clenching my jaw so hard my teeth ache. I think of the families in Kuala Lumpur who light candles every 8th of March. Do they hear the same hush? Or has their grief tuned them to another frequency entirely? I want to reach through the wire and tell them something comforting, but comfort died somewhere over the South Indian Ocean, and nobody has found the coordinates since. The counter is frozen at 90 minutes now. The software refuses to tick further. I suppose forever only needs a single second to declare itself. I remove the headphones, and the room rushes back. Cheap fluorescent hum, refrigerator motor, my own breathing like a faulty accordion. The mundane sounds almost feel obscene after the cathedral hush I just inhabited. Yet the carrier wave is still there, bleeding from the speakers at a volume only the soul can detect. I stand, legs tingling, and walk to the window. The city is a broken necklace of sodium vapor and neon, each bulb a private galaxy. Somewhere out past the horizon, 7 miles down, lies a hull that once carried 239 stories. All of them unfinished. I press my forehead to the cool glass and whisper the call sign one last time. Malaysian 370. The syllables fog the pain, then fade. Downstairs a car alarm yelps, a dog answers, and the night stitches itself back together with ordinary noises. But underneath, threading them all, the silence endures, patient, amphibious, older than any map. I return to the workstation, hover the cursor over the big red square labeled stop. My finger refuses. Pressing it feels like signing a death certificate for possibility itself. Instead, I drag the volume slider down to 0. The waveform remains, a mute testimony. If a tree falls and no one hears, does it make a sound? If a plane vanishes and still broadcasts, does it ever truly leave? I lean back, chair creaking like old floorboards, and close my eyes. Behind the lids, I see the starfield NASA released last week. Millions of pinpricks, each a sun with its own missing airliner, its own unanswered final call. Somewhere in that glitter I imagine a contrail that never fades, a vapor ghost forever crossing an equatorial sky. The cursor blinks, steady as a lighthouse abandoned by its keeper. I type 3 words into the metadata field. The silence continues. The search continues. Good night. Then I hit save, and the file compresses itself into a single kilobyte that somehow weighs more than the Indian Ocean. I stand, switch off the desk lamp, and the room drops into darkness except for the monitor's pallid glow. The carrier wave is still broadcasting from the speakers, but now it feels less like a signal and more like a lullaby the universe sings to itself when no one is listening. And maybe that is enough. I walk toward the exit, but at the threshold I pause. One last inhale of ozone and old coffee, then I flick the main breaker. The screens wink out, the hum dies, and the silence finally owns the room outright. It is vast, gentle, borderless. I step into the corridor, pull the door shut, and leave the wave to echo against blank walls, a heartbeat that will outlast us all. Somewhere above, dawn is only a few time zones away, and satellites are still tracing arcs across the same sky, Malaysian 370 once crossed. I whisper into the stairwell, not to the plane, not to the ocean, but to whoever listens next. Keep the channel open. The story isn't over. It just learned how to breathe underwater. And with that, I climb toward daylight, carrying the quiet like a lantern no wind can blow out.